The crack split the concrete like a lightning bolt frozen in stone, and Staff Sergeant Yara Okonkwo watched 300 tons of water begin punching through the dam face while the world around her dissolved into chaos. She stood chest deep in the flood surge, rifle raised above her head, and somewhere in the darkness, ahead a hostage was still waiting for a rescue that command had already abandoned. 14 hours earlier, the helicopter touched down in a field of dead sunflowers. Yara dropped from the bird before the skids fully settled, her boots finding purchase on soil that had not seen rain in weeks. The Eastern European autumn had turned everything brown and brittle, and the dust kicked up by the rotors tasted like chalk on her tongue. Behind her, 11 soldiers from the task force followed in tactical silence, each one loaded with enough gear to wage a small war. Sergeant First Class Tomas Delgado landed beside her and tapped her shoulder twice. The old signal. You good? She returned it. Good enough. They had worked together for 3 years now, ever since Delgado had pulled strings to get her assigned to his team after Kandahar. He never asked about what happened there, never pushed. He simply watched her back and trusted her to watch his, and in the economy of soldiers that was worth more than any medal. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from today. Maybe you have seen courage like this in your own community, or maybe you know someone who served. We would love to hear from you. The team moved out in a staggered column, navigating toward the ridgeline that would give them eyes on the valley below. Yara took point because she always took point. Her eyes caught what others missed. Tripwires, disturbed earth, the wrong kind of silence. Private First Class Emmett Sauer walked third in the formation, and she could hear his breathing from 10 meters away. Too fast, too shallow. The kid was 21 years old, and this was his first real operation, and his fear was broadcasting like a radio station. She slowed her pace until he caught up. Breathe through your nose, she said without looking at him. Count to 4 on the inhale. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Do it now. She heard him try. Heard him fail. Heard him try again. Better, she said. Keep doing that. Fear is just your body getting ready. Let it get ready, then put it to work. Sauer managed a whispered thank you, and Yara moved back to point without acknowledging it. She was not here to make friends. She was here to make sure everyone went home breathing. The ridgeline appeared through the treeline an hour before dawn, and Yara broke from the column to establish her position. Position Alpha, 800 meters from the target building, with a clear line of sight across the valley. She had studied the satellite imagery until she could draw it from memory, but satellites did not capture everything. She settled behind her rifle and let her scope drift across the terrain below. The valley held a small industrial town, mostly evacuated since the militia had moved in. Soviet-era architecture crumbling at the edges. A single paved road running north to south. And there, dominating the northern end of the valley, the Varashka Dam. Old Soviet construction, concrete and ambition, and very little maintenance in the decades since. The dam held back a reservoir that fed into the valley through a controlled spillway, and in theory the engineering was sound. Yara did not trust theory. She panned her scope across the dam face and felt her stomach tighten. Hairline fractures running along the base. Water seeping through in thin streams that caught the early light. Discoloration in the concrete that spoke of internal stress. She had seen structures fail before. In Kandahar, in places that still visited her dreams. Overwatch to command, she said into her radio, requesting structural assessment of the dam. I am seeing significant stress fractures along the base. Possible integrity compromise. The radio crackled. Then Captain Victor Hessler's voice came through, clipped and dismissive. Overwatch, your job is to watch the target building, not play engineer. The dam is held for 60 years. It will hold for another 6 hours. Focus on your sector. Yara's jaw tightened. She keyed the radio again. Sir, I am observing active water seepage through multiple fracture points. If we initiate assault and any ordnance impacts near that structure, I cannot guarantee it will hold. Recommend we factor contingency into the assault plan. Noted and dismissed, Hessler replied. Maintain position and await further orders. Command out. Delgado's voice came through on the secondary channel, private between them. He is not going to listen, Yara. I know. You did what you could. Yara stared through her scope at the dam, at the water, finding its way through concrete that was supposed to be solid, at the valley below that would become a grave if she was right and Hessler was wrong. I know, she said again, but being right will not matter if everyone drowns. She settled deeper into her position and began the long work of watching and waiting. Somewhere in the building 800 meters away, an American engineer named Dr. Kerensky was counting the hours until rescue or death. Yara intended to make sure it was rescue, even if command had other plans. The sun climbed higher, and the dam groaned in the morning wind. No one else seemed to hear it. Captain Victor Hessler arrived at the staging area like a man who had already written his medal citation. His boots were too clean for the terrain and his uniform too pressed for a combat zone. And when he walked past the soldiers preparing their gear, not one of them looked him in the eye. Yara watched from her position on the ridge as he gathered the team leaders for his briefing. She had seen officers like him before. West Point confidence wrapped around political ambition, decorated for operations where other men did the bleeding. Hessler had commanded from behind a desk in 3 different theaters, and each time the commendations had found their way to his chest while the body bags found their way home. Delgado climbed the ridge to her position and settled beside her with a grunt. He wants you at the briefing, he said. Of course he does. Yara broke down her rifle with practiced efficiency and followed Delgado back to the staging area. The team had gathered in a shallow depression between 2 hills, natural cover from observation. Hessler stood at the center with a tablet displaying satellite imagery, his face wearing the expression of a man who had already decided everything worth deciding. Sergeant Okonkwo, Hessler said as she approached. Good of you to join us. I trust your engineering concerns have been satisfied. No, sir, Yara replied. They have not. The other soldiers shifted. Delgado closed his eyes briefly. Hessler's smile did not reach his eyes. Then let me put your mind at ease. I have consulted with command, and they assure me the dam is structurally sound. Your observations, while noted, do not align with the intelligence assessment. I suggest you focus on what you do best and leave structural analysis to the experts. Yara held his gaze. With respect, sir, I have seen that dam through a scope for 5 hours. I'm telling you what I observed. Water is moving through fractures that should not exist. If we deploy explosives anywhere near that structure, we risk catastrophic failure. And I am telling you, Hessler said, his voice hardening, that your assessment has been reviewed and dismissed. The assault proceeds as planned. 0 Dark 30. 3 teams, simultaneous breach. Overwatch provides cover from position Alpha. Questions? It was not a question. It was a closure. Yara felt the words building in her throat. The warnings she could give. The lives she could argue for. But she had been here before, standing in front of an officer who had already decided that being right mattered more than being correct. In Kandahar, she had trusted the rank. She had followed the order. And Teo Myers had died in her arms because of it. She said nothing. There was nothing left to say that would change anything. The briefing continued for another 20 minutes. 3 assault teams. Alpha team through the front, Bravo through the east wing, Charlie through the roof. Yara would provide overwatch and eliminate any external threats. Extraction at the bridge 2 kilometers south. Helicopter support on standby. It was a clean plan on paper. Aggressive. Direct. The kind of plan that earned medals when it worked and blame when it failed. When Hessler dismissed them, Yara returned to the ridge without speaking to anyone. She reassembled her rifle and settled back into position, letting the scope become her world again. The dam stared back at her, patient, waiting. An hour before sunset, boots scraped on rock behind her. She did not turn. Sergeant Okonkwo, said a young voice. Private Sauer. She made room for him beside her position. I wanted to thank you, he said. For earlier. The breathing thing. It helped. Good. Sauer was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question she knew was coming. What is it like? Being a sniper. Yara considered the question. Most people wanted the movie answer. The drama. The kill counts. The weight of playing God from 1,000 meters away. But Sauer was not asking about that. His voice carried something else. Something younger. It means being alone when it matters most, she said. Everyone else moves together, assaults together, bleeds together. But you are up on a ridge somewhere, watching through glass. And when the moment comes, it is just you. No one to check your math. No one to share the weight. You see everything, and you carry it alone. Sauer absorbed this. That sounds hard, he said. It is. Then why do you do it? Yara thought about Kandahar, about Teo, about the officer who gave an order, and the bullet that found the wrong chest. Because someone has to see what others miss, she said. And because when you see it, you have to act on it, even when no one else will. Sauer nodded slowly. He did not fully understand. He could not yet. But someday, if he lived long enough, he would. Go get some rest, Yara told him. Tonight is going to be long. He left her alone with her rifle and her thoughts and the dam that groaned in the distance. As darkness fell across the valley, Delgado appeared one final time. He did not speak at first, just sat beside her and watched the stars emerge over the reservoir. You know he's going to get people killed, Yara said. I know, and we're going to follow orders anyway. Delgado sighed. We are soldiers, Yara. Following orders is what we do. But listening to you is what I do. So tell me what you need. Yara turned to look at him. In 3 years, he had never asked her that question. I need you to stay alive tonight, she said. Whatever happens, whatever goes wrong, stay alive. Delgado held her gaze for a long moment. Same to you, Okonkwo. Same to you. He left her alone as the final light faded from the sky. Across the valley, the assault teams were making their final preparations, checking weapons, writing letters that might never be sent, making peace with whatever gods they carried. Yara did none of those things. She simply watched the dam through her scope and counted the new streams of water pushing through concrete that was supposed to hold. The mission would launch in 3 hours. She wondered if the dam would last that long. 0-30 arrived with a cold wind sweeping down from the mountains. Yara settled into her position and felt the familiar calm descend over her body. The calm that came before violence. The calm that made her dangerous. Through her scope, the valley lay silent and dark. The target building sat 300 meters from the dam, a squat government structure from the Soviet era with barred windows and a flat roof. Militia guards patrolled the perimeter in predictable patterns, their cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the darkness. Alpha Team, in position, crackled through her earpiece. Bravo Team, in position. Charlie Team, standing by on the roof approach. Hessler's voice came through cold and commanding. All teams hold for my mark. Overwatch, confirm visual on primary target building. Yara keyed her radio. Overwatch confirms. 8 tangos, visible on exterior patrol. Rotating every 6 minutes. Recommend we time breach to patrol gap. Negative, Overwatch. Breach on my mark. 30 seconds. Yara bit back her response. 30 seconds would put the breach right as 2 patrol routes converged at the east entrance. Bravo Team would walk into a crossfire. She made a decision. Bravo, this is Overwatch. Recommend you delay entry by 15 seconds after mark. Patrol convergence at your breach point. A pause. Then Bravo Team leader's voice, quiet and grateful. Copy, Overwatch. 15-second delay. Hessler either did not hear or did not care. His countdown began. 10 seconds. 5. Mark. The night exploded into motion. Alpha Team hit the front entrance with a breaching charge that shattered the reinforced door. Yara tracked the chaos through her scope, dropping the first guard who raised his weapon toward the entry team. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The guard fell. She was already moving to the next target. Charlie Team descended from the roof on fast ropes, their boots hitting concrete as gunfire erupted from inside the building. Yara swept her scope across the roofline and caught a militia fighter emerging from a maintenance hatch. Her second shot took him before he could aim. Bravo Team breached 15 seconds late, and because of that delay, they entered through a clear doorway instead of killbox. The 2 patrol guards who would have intercepted them lay face down in the dirt, dropped by Yara's 3rd and 4th rounds. For 90 seconds, the assault went perfectly. Then the first explosion rocked the valley. Yara felt the shock wave before she heard the sound. Her scope jumped, and when she reacquired the image, she saw fire blooming near the base of the dam. The militia had rigged explosives, booby traps, and the assault had triggered them. All teams, Yara said in her radio, explosion near dam structure. I repeat, explosion at the dam. Hessler's voice cut through the chaos. Continue the assault. The dam is not your concern. Sir, I am observing significant structural compromise. The blast occurred at the base. I am seeing new fracture lines spreading from the impact point. Overwatch, focus on your targets. Command out. Yara wanted to scream. Instead, she continued working. 2 more militia down, then a third. The assault teams were inside the building now, their gunfire echoing through the valley in staccato bursts. Another explosion, closer to the dam this time. Through her scope, Yara watched a section of concrete the size of a truck shift. Water sprayed through the new gaps with enough force to create mist in the cold air. The fractures she had warned about were spreading, connecting, becoming something worse. All units, she broadcast on the open channel. Dam failure imminent. I repeat, dam failure imminent. Recommend immediate extraction to high ground. Negative, Hessler snapped. We are not leaving without the hostage. All teams continue to objective. Delgado's voice came through, strained with exertion. Overwatch, we have located the hostage. 3rd floor. Heavy resistance. We need 5 more minutes. You may not have 5 minutes, Yara said. Then give us what you can. Yara swept her scope back to the building. A militia fighter appeared in a 3rd floor window, aiming down at the assault teams below. She dropped him with a single round. Another appeared. Another fell. She was the angel of death perched on a ridge, and for the men trying to kill her teammates, there was no hiding from her sight. But she could not shoot a dam. The 3rd explosion was the largest. Yara felt it in her chest, a deep bass thunder that rolled across the valley like the voice of an angry god. She swung her scope to the dam and watched in horror as a section of the face collapsed outward. Water did not pour through the gap. It erupted, a horizontal geyser of black water punching into the night with enough force to strip trees from the hillside below. The reservoir began emptying itself into the valley with a sound like the world tearing apart. All units, Yara shouted into her radio. Dam has failed. I repeat, the dam has failed. Evacuate to high ground immediately. Evacuate now. The radio dissolved into chaos. Screaming, gunfire, the roar of water drowning out everything else. Yara watched through her scope as the flood surge raced down the valley toward the town, toward the building, toward her team. She was 800 meters away on high ground. She could not help them. She could only watch. The wall of water hit the valley floor like the fist of God. Yara watched through her scope as the surge swallowed everything in its path. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Vehicles tumbled end over end. The patrol roads vanished beneath a churning mass of black water and debris. The radio exploded with voices. Alpha Team, we are flooding. Ground floor is gone. Moving to 2nd level. Bravo Team, taking casualties. Rodriguez is down. The water came through the walls. Charlie Team, cut off on a roof. No way down. Repeat, no way down. Yara scanned desperately for any sign of Delgado. The 3rd floor windows showed muzzle flashes, gunfire still erupting despite the chaos below. He was alive, still fighting. Then Hessler's voice cut through everything else, cold and decisive in a way that made Yara's blood freeze. All units, this is command. Mission abort. I repeat, mission abort. All teams extract to Rally Point Sigma immediately. Helicopter extraction in 15 minutes. Yara keyed her radio. Command, we still have teams inside the building with a hostage. They cannot extract through floodwaters. Negative, Overwatch. Building is compromised. Hostage is acceptable collateral. All surviving units extract immediately. That is a direct order. The words hung in the air like poison. Acceptable collateral. Yara thought of Dr. Kerensky, the engineer they had come to rescue. A man with a family somewhere. A man who had been counting the hours until Americans came to save him. And now an officer in a clean uniform was writing him off because the mission had become inconvenient. She thought of Kandahar, of another officer making another calculation, of Teo bleeding out while command debated acceptable losses. Not again. Through her scope, she saw movement in the flooded streets below, a figure struggling through chest-deep water, being swept toward a pile of debris. She recognized the helmet, the gear configuration. Sauer. Private Sauer. She broadcast on the tactical channel. I have eyes on you. 20 meters to your left there is a partially submerged vehicle. Use it for cover and work your way toward the building on the north side. The water is shallower there. She watched the young soldier's head turn, searching for the vehicle. He found it. Started moving. 10 meters, she said. 5. Good. Now hold position and catch your breath. Sauer clung to the vehicle's roof, his chest heaving. All around him, the water churned with debris and darkness. Other soldiers were scattered through the flood, some moving, some not moving at all. Overwatch, Sauer gasped into his radio. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You need to reach the 2-story building to your north. Can you see it? I see it. The current is going to push you east. Compensate by angling west as you move. Go now, before the water rises higher. She watched him push off from the vehicle and begin the desperate swim. The current caught him immediately, trying to drag him toward the wreckage downstream. But he fought it, angled west like she told him, kicked harder than she thought he had in him. He reached the building and pulled himself through a shattered window onto the second floor. I am in, he reported. I am okay. Find other survivors and hold position, Yara ordered. Do not attempt extraction through the flood. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. Yara swept her scope back to the target building. The first floor was completely submerged now, water lapping at the second-floor windows. But the third floor remained above the waterline, and she could still see movement inside. Delgado, she said on their private channel. Report. Static. Then his voice, weak but alive. Still here, Okonkwo. We have the hostage. 6 of us made it to the third floor before the water hit. But we have got wounded, and there's still militia up here with us. We are pinned down. Can you hold? For now. But Hessler ordered extraction. He is leaving us. Yara felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Something harder. I heard, she said. Yara, if you can get to extraction, go. Do not throw away your life for. Stop talking, she said. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at the valley below. The water had stabilized somewhat, finding its level between the hills. The target building rose from the flood like an island, its third floor still clear. Between her position and that building lay 800 meters of flooded terrain, debris, and an unknown number of militia. She could extract, reach the rally point, get on a helicopter, and fly away from this disaster. Or she could do what she had failed to do in Kandahar. She could stay. Overwatch to any surviving unit. She broadcast on the open channel. I am maintaining position. The hostage is still viable. If you can reach high ground, hold there. We're not done. Hessler's voice came back immediately, furious. Overwatch, you're ordered to extract. That is a direct command. Failure to comply will result in court-martial. Yara reached down and turned off her radio. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. She settled back behind her rifle and began planning the impossible. 800 meters of flood, limited ammunition, no support, no extraction, just her rifle, and a promise she had made to herself 3 years ago over the body of a dead friend. Never again. Dawn came gray and cold, revealing the full scope of the devastation. The valley had become a lake. Rooftops and treetops broke the surface like islands in a sea of brown water. Debris floated everywhere, spinning in lazy currents that still carried enough force to kill. Yara had not slept. She had spent the night watching, counting, planning. Through her scope, she cataloged what remained. The target building stood firm, its Soviet construction built to survive worse than water. Third floor still above the floodline. Movement visible in the windows. Some of that movement was her people. Some was not. She counted militia. 8 visible over the past 4 hours. Likely more inside. They had the high ground within the building, and they knew the assault team was trapped. She counted ammunition. 16 rounds remaining. She had lost some magazines during the chaos, and there was no resupply coming. She counted routes. The direct path was impossible. 800 meters of open water with no cover. But there was another way, a longer way, through the flooded streets on the eastern edge of the valley, using submerged vehicles and partially collapsed buildings as waypoints. It would require swimming, a lot of swimming, in water cold enough to kill if she stayed in too long. Yara Okonkwo had done harder things. She broke down her position with mechanical efficiency, waterproofing her rifle in its protective case, securing her ammunition in sealed pouches, stripping away everything non-essential. When she finished, she carried only what she needed to kill and nothing more. The descent from Position Alpha took 20 minutes. She moved carefully, aware that the militia might have scouts watching the high ground. At the water's edge, she paused and felt the cold seeping through her boots. She thought of her father, a steelworker in Gary, Indiana, who had died in an industrial accident when she was 19. He used to tell her that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision that something else mattered more than fear. Today, something else mattered more. She slipped into the water. The cold hit her like a physical blow. Her muscles seized. Her breath caught. For a terrible moment, her body refused to move at all, every nerve screaming at her to get out, to find warmth, to survive. She forced herself forward. The swimming was brutal. The water was not just cold but thick with debris, mud, and things she did not want to identify. Her rifle case dragged at her shoulders. Her boots filled with water and became anchors. Every stroke was a fight against the current, against the cold, against her own failing body. She reached the first waypoint, a delivery truck, its cab barely above the surface. She pulled herself onto the roof and lay there gasping, her body shaking with the first stages of hypothermia. 200 meters down, 600 to go. She allowed herself 60 seconds of rest. Then she rolled back into the water and kept moving. The second waypoint was a collapsed awning, its frame creating a pocket of air above the flood. She surfaced beneath it and found a moment of shelter from the wind that had started cutting across the water surface. Her fingers were numb. Her lips were blue. She could feel her thoughts slowing, the cold creeping in her brain and whispering lies about rest, about sleep, about giving up. She thought of Delgado, wounded and waiting, trusting her to come. She thought of Teo Myers, bleeding out in Kandahar while she followed an order that killed him. She thought of the promise she had made over his body. Never again. She pushed back into the water. The third waypoint almost killed her. The current shifted as she approached a half-submerged building, and suddenly she was being pulled toward a tangle of debris, sharp metal and shattered glass waiting to tear her apart. She kicked desperately, angling away from the death trap, her lungs burning as the water closed over her head. For a moment, she was underwater and disoriented, unsure which way was up. The darkness pressed in around her. The cold squeezed her chest. Then her hand found something solid, a window frame. She pulled herself up and through, collapsing onto a flooded second floor that gave her just enough space to breathe. She lay there for a long time. Too long. She could feel her body surrendering to the cold, the shaking becoming less violent as her core temperature dropped. This was how people died, not in a dramatic moment of sacrifice, just alone and cold and too tired to keep fighting. Yara forced her eyes open. Through the window, she could see the target building, 400 meters away, close enough to see the third-floor windows clearly, close enough to see Delgado's face appear in one of them, scanning the water for something, for someone, for her. She dragged herself upright, checked her rifle, still sealed, still dry, still deadly. 400 meters, 2 more waypoints, maybe 30 minutes if she pushed hard. She could make it. She had to make it. Yara Okonkwo slipped back into the water and kept swimming toward the people who needed her. Behind her, the sun climbed higher over a valley that had become a grave. Ahead of her, the hardest part was still waiting. The final stretch nearly broke her. Yara pulled herself onto the roof of a submerged bus, her arms trembling so badly she could barely grip the metal. The target building was 200 meters away now, close enough to hear the occasional gunshot echoing from inside, close enough to see the militia moving past windows on the third floor, close enough to die if she made a single mistake. She lay on the bus roof and let her body shake. The hypothermia was advanced now. She could feel it in the way her thoughts came slower, in the way her fingers refused to obey simple commands. Her core temperature had dropped far enough that her body was starting to shut down non-essential functions. Soon it would start shutting down essential ones. She had maybe an hour before the cold killed her. Maybe less. Through the fog in her mind, a memory surfaced. Kandahar. 3 years ago. A different rooftop. A different kind of cold. She had been 29 years old and invincible. Or so she thought. Her spotter, Corporal Teo Myers, had been with her for 18 months. They had developed the kind of partnership that snipers dreamed about. He read Win like poetry. She shot like mathematics. Together, they were perfect. The mission had been simple. Overwatch on a compound where a high-value target was meeting with insurgent leaders. Wait for positive identification. Take the shot. Extract. But the intelligence was wrong. The compound was not lightly defended. It was a fortress, and when the target emerged, he was surrounded by enough fighters to start a small war. Yara had the shot. A difficult angle, but makeable. She told command she could take it. The officer in charge, a major whose name she had burned from her memory, ordered her to hold. Wait for a better opportunity. Do not risk alerting the compound. She held. She waited. The opportunity never came. When the insurgents finally spotted their position, Teo took the first bullet. It hit him in the side below his vest. He went down hard, and suddenly the mathematics of her world collapsed into chaos. The major ordered immediate extraction. Fall back to the rally point. Leave the wounded if necessary. Yara refused. She grabbed Teo and started dragging him toward cover, firing one-handed at the fighters pouring out of the compound. She made it 50 meters before a second bullet found Teo's chest. He died looking at her. His last words were not profound. He just said her name, Yara, like a question he would never get to finish asking. She killed 11 men, getting his body out of that valley. The major recommended her for a Bronze Star. She told him exactly where he could put his medal, using language that should have ended her career. It did not end her career, but it ended something else. The part of her that trusted officers to make the right call. The part of her that believed the system would protect the people who deserved protecting. She started working alone after that. No more spotters. No more partners. No more chances for someone else to die because she followed an order she knew was wrong. Until now, Yara opened her eyes and stared at the target building across the water. Delgado was in there. Sauer was somewhere in this flooded valley. Dr. Kerensky was waiting to be rescued or executed, and Captain Victor Hessler had flown away in a helicopter, leaving them all to die. The parallel was so perfect it made her want to laugh. Or scream. Or both. But there was one difference. One crucial difference that changed everything. In Kandahar, she had followed the order. She had waited when she should have shot. She had trusted the rank when she should have trusted herself. Not this time. This time, she had turned off her radio. This time, she had chosen to stay. This time, she was not following anyone's orders but her own. Teo would understand. Teo would approve. Yara forced herself to sit up. Her body screamed in protest, every muscle fiber begging her to stop, to rest, to let the cold take her somewhere warm and dark and peaceful. She ignored all. She checked her rifle one final time. Still sealed. Still ready. 16 rounds waiting to be sent downrange with perfect precision. 16 rounds. 8 confirmed militia. Maybe more inside. The math did not work. But mathematics had never been the only thing that mattered. She slipped off the bus roof and back into the water. The cold barely registered now. Her body had moved past pain into something else. A state of pure function. Pure purpose. 200 meters. One final push. She swam. The target building grew larger in her vision with every stroke. She could see the windows clearly now. Could see the shadows moving behind dirty glass. Could see the third floor where her people were trapped and fighting. She reached the building's eastern wall and found a shattered window just above the waterline. The flood had risen to the middle of the second floor, leaving the upper levels dry. She pulled herself through the window and collapsed onto a floor covered in debris and standing water. For a long moment, she just lay there, breathing, existing, feeling the building solid beneath her body after hours of fighting the water. Then she heard voices above her, shouting in a language she did not speak. Gunfire. A scream. Yara rose to her feet. She unsealed her rifle case and assembled her weapon with fingers that still trembled but remembered their purpose. She checked the scope, checked the action, chambered a round. 16 bullets. 8 targets minimum. No margin for error. She started climbing the stairs toward the sound of the guns, toward the people who needed her, toward the ending she had chosen. The stairwell smelled of mold and gunpowder and fear. Yara moved through it like a ghost, her rifle tucked against her shoulder, her breathing controlled despite the cold still radiating from her bones. Each step was deliberate, silent, the product of years of training compressed in a muscle memory. She reached the second floor landing and paused. Listened. Above her, voices echoed through the concrete corridors. Harsh commands in a Slavic dialect she could not translate, but understood well enough. The militia was consolidating, preparing for something. She continued climbing. The third-floor hallway stretched before her, lit only by gray daylight filtering through shattered windows at either end. Doors lined both sides, most of them closed. At the far end, approximately 40 meters away, she could see a barricade of overturned furniture blocking access to what looked like a larger room. That was where they would be. Delgado, the hostage, the surviving members of the assault team, pinned down behind whatever cover they could find while militia fighters controlled the rest of the floor. Between Yara and that barricade stood at least 4 doorways. Any one of them could hide an enemy. She started moving. The first door was open. She sliced the angle with her rifle, clearing the room in a single fluid motion. Empty. An old office, furniture overturned, papers scattered across a flooded floor. The second door was closed. She pressed her ear against it and heard nothing. Tested the handle. Locked. She moved on. The third door saved her life. It burst open as she approached, a militia fighter lunging through with a knife in his hand and murder in his eyes. He must have heard her footsteps, must have been waiting. Yara reacted on instinct. She stepped offline, letting his momentum carry him past her, and drove the butt of her rifle into the base of his skull. He went down hard and did not get up. She did not waste a bullet. Bullets were precious now. The noise brought others. A shout from the far end of the hallway. Running footsteps. Yara dropped to one knee and raised her rifle. The first militia fighter rounded the corner at full sprint. Her bullet caught him center mass, and he crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. The second fighter was smarter, stopping short of the corner and firing blind around the edge. Bullets chewed into the wall above Yara's head. She rolled left, finding cover in a doorway, and waited. Patience. That was what separated snipers from soldiers. The willingness to wait. To let the target make a mistake. The second fighter made his mistake 3 seconds later. He leaned out to get a better angle, exposing his shoulder and the side of his head. Yara's second shot removed him from the equation. 14 rounds remaining. She moved forward, stepping over the bodies, and reached the barricade at the end of the hall. Up close, she could see it was hastily constructed. Desks and chairs, and filing cabinets piled together by desperate hands. American, she called out, keeping her voice low but clear. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo. Overwatch. Coming in. A moment of silence. Then a voice she knew better than her own. Okonkwo. Delgado's voice was rough with pain, but unmistakably alive. Get in here. Now. She squeezed through a gap in the barricade and found herself in what had once been a conference room. Large windows overlooked the flooded valley. A long table had been flipped on its side for cover. And behind that cover, 5 figures huddled in various states of injury and exhaustion. Delgado sat propped against the wall, his left leg wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. Two other soldiers flanked him, one holding a rifle, the other pressing a field dressing to a wound in his side. A fourth soldier, a woman Yara did not recognize, was positioned at the window with a carbine. And in the center of them all, hands bound with zip ties, sat a gray-haired man in civilian clothes. Dr. Kerensky, the hostage, still alive. Yara crossed to Delgado and knelt beside him. "You look terrible," she said. "You should see the other guys." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "How did you get here?" "We saw the extraction birds leave. I swam." Delgado stared at her. "The water is 40 degrees. I noticed." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Delgado reached out and gripped her arm with surprising strength. "You crazy, stubborn, magnificent soldier. I knew you would come. I told them. I said Okonkwo does not leave people behind." Yara felt something loosen in her chest, something she had been carrying for 3 years without realizing it. "Not anymore," she said quietly. "Not ever again." She turned to assess the tactical situation. The conference room was defensible, but not sustainable. One door, the one she had come through, and the windows. The militia controlled the rest of the floor, and probably had reinforcements coming. "How many hostiles remaining?" she asked. The soldier at the window answered. "We have counted 6 moving on this floor. Probably more below." Yara did the math. 6 targets. 14 rounds. Better odds than before. Ammunition status. Low, Delgado admitted. Maybe 30 round between all of us. The flood took most of our gear. Yara nodded. She moved to the window and looked out at the valley below. The water had stabilized, creating a new landscape of rooftops and debris fields. In the distance, she could see the ridge where Position Alpha still stood, untouched by the flood. And beyond that, nothing. No helicopters. No rescue. No cavalry coming over the hill. They were alone. She turned back to face the team. 5 wounded soldiers. 1 civilian hostage. 14 rounds and a rifle. And an unknown number of militia fighters between them and survival. The math still did not work. But Yara had never been good at accepting impossible odds. "Here is what we're going to do," she said. And she began to explain a plan that had no right to succeed. The plan was simple because simple was all they had. Yara would move through the building alone, eliminating militia fighters one by one while the team held position. When she had cleared enough a path, they would move the hostage to the roof. From there, they would signal for extraction using the emergency beacon that Delgado had managed to keep dry. If anyone was still listening, if anyone still cared. Sergeant Shun, the woman at the window, spoke first. "That is suicide. You are 1 person against 6 armed fighters in a building they know better than you." Yara checked her rifle. 7, she corrected. "I left 1 unconscious in the hallway. He will wake up eventually. That is not making me feel better. It is not supposed to." Yara looked at her. "Your job is to hold this room. Keep the hostage alive. Keep Sergeant First Class Delgado from doing anything stupid." Delgado snorted. "Too late for that." Yara almost smiled. Almost. But there was no room for smiles right now. Only room for the cold calculation of violence. She moved toward the barricade, then stopped. "Turn back. There is something you should know," she said, addressing the whole team. "Captain Hessler ordered mission abort. He called the hostage acceptable collateral. He left on the extraction bird while you were still fighting for your lives." Silence. The soldiers exchanged glances. "I'm telling you this because when we get out of here, there's going to be a reckoning. Hessler is going to try to spin this. He's going to claim he ordered the rescue. He's going to take credit for what we did here. I need you all to remember the truth." Delgado's voice was hard. "We will remember." "Good." Yara turned back toward the barricade. "Because I'm not doing this just to save your lives. I am doing it because someone has to prove that his way is wrong." She slipped through the gap and disappeared into the hallway. The building had changed since she entered. The militia had pulled back, consolidating their forces somewhere deeper in the structure. She could hear them talking, their voices echoing through the concrete corridors like ghosts. She followed the sound. The first fighter was standing guard at a stairwell landing, his back to her as he watched the floor below. She closed the distance in absolute silence, her boots finding the quiet spots on the floor as if by instinct. He never heard her coming. She used the knife this time. Quick, quiet, conserving ammunition for when stealth was no longer possible. 13 rounds remaining. 6 targets. The second fighter was harder. He was patrolling a corridor on the far side of the floor, moving with the nervous energy of a man who knew death was hunting him. Yara tracked him from the shadows, waiting for the moment when his pattern brought him close enough. When it came, she did not hesitate. The knife again. Another silent kill. 5 targets. She found the third and fourth together. They had barricaded themselves in an office, arguing in heated whispers about what to do. Run or fight. Stay or flee. They were scared, and scared men made mistakes. Yara kicked open the door and shot them both before they could raise their weapons. 2 rounds. 2 kills. 11 rounds remaining. 3 targets. The gunshots changed everything. The building erupted with shouting, running footsteps, the chaos of men realizing they were being hunted. Yara moved faster now, abandoning stealth for speed. The remaining militia would be converging on her position. She needed to find them before they found her. She found one in the stairwell, rushing up toward the sound of the shots. Her bullet caught him in the throat, and he tumbled backward down the stairs. 10 rounds. 2 targets. The last 2 were smarter. They had retreated to the ground floor, taking position in the flooded entrance hall where the water would slow any approach. Yara could hear them splashing below, could hear their panicked breathing echoing up through the building. She did not pursue. Not yet. Instead, she returned to the conference room. Clear to the roof, she reported. 2 remaining hostiles on the ground floor. They're not coming up. Delgado looked at her with something approaching awe. How many did you take? 5. In 10 minutes. I was motivated. Chun helped Delgado to his feet while the other soldiers lifted Dr. Kerensky. The hostage was shaking, overwhelmed by the violence that had erupted around him, but he was alive. That was what mattered. They moved as a group toward the roof access stairwell. Yara took point, her rifle sweeping each corner, each doorway, each shadow that might hide a threat. Behind her, the wounded limped and staggered but kept moving. The roof access door was rusted but functional. Yara pushed through and emerged into the gray morning light. The valley spread out before them, transformed into a vast lake dotted with debris and destruction. The dam was a shattered ruin at the northern end, water still pouring through its broken face. And in the distance, the ridgeline where this had all started. Delgado activated the emergency beacon. Now we wait, he said. Yara nodded, but she did not lower her rifle. There were still 2 militia fighters in the building below, still threats that could emerge at any moment. And somewhere out there, Captain Victor Hessler was probably already composing the report that would make him a hero. She thought about that, thought about the injustice of it, thought about all the times men like Hessler had taken credit for the blood and sacrifice of soldiers like her. Not this time, she whispered to herself. Not ever again. The beacon pulsed its silent signal into the sky, and Yara watched the horizon for any sign of rescue. The beacon had been pulsing for 20 minutes when Yara heard the footsteps below. She held up a fist. The team froze. Even Dr. Kerensky, who had no military training, understood that signal well enough to stop breathing. Yara moved to the roof access door and listened. 2 sets of footsteps on the stairs, moving slowly, cautiously. The surviving militia had decided to make their move. She looked back at the team. Delgado was propped against an air conditioning unit, his wounded legs stretched out before him, his rifle trained on the door. Chen had positioned herself near the roof's edge, covering the windows in case anyone tried to climb up from outside. The other 2 soldiers flanked the hostage, ready to move him if necessary. Good positions, professional instincts. Even wounded and exhausted, these were soldiers who knew their craft. Yara turned back to the door. The footsteps stopped. A whispered conversation she could not make out. Then silence. They were planning something. Probably a grenade through the door, or a coordinated rush. The smart play would be to wait them out, let them commit to an attack and counter it. But Yara had never been good at waiting when she could act instead. She yanked open the door and fired. The first militia fighter was 3 steps down, a grenade in his hand with the pin already pulled. Her bullet hit him in the forehead, and he collapsed backward, the grenade tumbling from his dead fingers. The second fighter screamed something in his native tongue and raised his weapon. Yara was faster. 2 shots. Center mass. He fell against the wall and slid down, leaving a red streak on the concrete. She grabbed the door frame and swung herself onto the stairs, landing beside the first body. The grenade lay 2 steps below, its spoon already released, its fuse burning toward detonation. 3 seconds, maybe less. Yara scooped up the grenade and threw it down the stairwell in a single fluid motion. Then she turned and dove back through the roof access door, slamming it shut behind her. The explosion shook the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. The door rattled in its frame, but held. Yara lay on her back, staring at the gray sky, her heart pounding against her ribs. "That was 8, Delgado said from somewhere to her left. His voice carried a mix of relief and disbelief. "Please tell me that was the last of them." Yara pushed herself upright. "I think so, but I'm not counting on it." She moved back to her position at the roof's edge and scanned the building below. No movement in the windows. No sounds of reinforcement. The militia force that had held this building was gone, eliminated by one woman with a rifle and a refusal to quit. 8 rounds remaining. The waiting resumed. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist and revealing the full devastation of the valley below. The floodwaters had begun to recede slightly, exposing more rooftops, more debris, more evidence of lives destroyed. Dr. Kerensky sat with his back against the roof's low wall, his bound hands resting in his lap. He had not spoken since the rescue began, too shocked by the violence to form words. But now he looked at Yara with something like wonder. "You came for me," he said. His accent was thick, Eastern European with American undertones. The product of decades living between 2 worlds. "They said no one was coming. They said I was going to die here." Yara kept her eyes on the horizon. "They were wrong. Why? Why did you risk your life for a stranger?" "Because someone had to." Kerensky was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have a daughter. In Virginia. She is 12. I have not seen her in 4 months." Yara thought of her own mother, a nurse in Gary, Indiana, who had raised her alone after her father died. A woman who had begged her not to enlist and then cried with pride at every promotion. "You will see her again," Yara said. "I promise." It was a promise she had no right to make. But sometimes promises were not about certainty. They were about will. Chin's voice cut through the moment. "Contact. Southwest. Helicopter inbound." Yara spun toward the horizon and raised her scope. There, a black dot growing larger against the pale sky. The distinctive silhouette of a military helicopter. For a terrible moment, she wondered if it was Hessler. Coming back to take credit. Coming back to spin the narrative before anyone could tell the truth. But as the helicopter drew closer, she recognized the markings. Not the task force bird. A different unit. Search and rescue configuration. Someone had heard the beacon. Delgado laughed. It was a painful sound, ragged with exhaustion and relief. They came. They actually came. The helicopter circled once, the crew chief leaning out to assess the situation. Yara raised her hand in the standard signal. Friendly forces. Wounded aboard. Ready for extraction. The pilot brought the bird down onto the roof with practiced precision, the rotor whipping Yara's uniform against her body. The crew chief jumped out before the skids fully touched, already moving toward the wounded. "For casualties," Yara shouted over the noise. "1 civilian hostage. Get them loaded first." The crew chief nodded and went to work. Within minutes, Delgado was strapped to a stretcher, Dr. Kerensky was buckled into a seat, and the other wounded were secured for flight. Yara was the last aboard. She stood at the helicopter's door and looked back at the building. At the flooded valley, at the shattered dam that had nearly killed them all. She thought about Teo, about Kandahar, about all the years she had spent carrying guilt for a death that was never her fault. She had not saved Teo. She could not change the past, but she had saved these people, and that had to count for something. Yara climbed aboard and pulled the door shut behind her. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the water and the death and the building that had almost become their tomb. Below them, the valley shrank to a scar on the landscape. Ahead of them, a reckoning was waiting. The forward operating base erupted into chaos when the helicopter touched down. Medical teams swarmed the bird before the rotors stopped spinning, stretchers appearing from nowhere, voices shouting orders and assessments. Delgado was lifted out first, his face pale, but his eyes still sharp. He grabbed Yara's wrist as they carried him past. "Do not let him win," he said. "Whatever happens next, do not let him rewrite this." Then he was gone, swallowed by the organized pandemonium of military medicine. Yara stepped off the helicopter and felt the solid ground beneath her boots. Her body was shutting down now, the adrenaline finally fading, the hypothermia and exhaustion catching up with brutal efficiency. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred at the edges. Every step felt like walking through wet concrete. But she stayed upright. She would not collapse. Not yet. Not until she finished what she started. A medical officer approached her with a thermal blanket and a look of professional concern. "Staff Sergeant, you need to come with me. Your core temperature is dangerously low. We need to get you warmed up immediately." "In a minute," Yara said. "Where is Captain Hessler?" The medical officer hesitated. "He is in the command tent, debriefing with Colonel Vasquez." "But Sergeant, you really need to." Yara was already walking. The command tent stood at the center of the FOB, a large canvas structure bristling with antennas and communication equipment. Two military police officers flanked the entrance, their expressions professionally neutral. "I need to speak with Colonel Vasquez," Yara said. "The colonel is in a classified briefing." One of the MPs replied. "You will have to wait. The briefing is about me, about my team. I have relevant information that cannot wait." Before the MP could respond, the tent flap opened and a voice cut through the morning air. "Let her in." Colonel Elena Vasquez stood in the entrance, a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen 30 years of military service. Her uniform bore the insignia of a career spent in places most Americans would never hear about. "Staff Sergeant Okonkwo," she said. "I was hoping you would come." Yara stepped past the MPs and into the tent. The interior was organized chaos. Maps covered every surface. Radio operators murmured into headsets. And, at the center of it all, standing beside a tactical display with his back ramrod straight, was Captain Victor Hessler. He looked exactly as he had before the mission. Clean uniform, perfect posture, the face of a man who had never doubted himself in his life. When he saw Yara, something flickered behind his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. "Sergeant Okonkwo," he said, his voice carrying false warmth. "Thank God you made it out. I was just telling Colonel Vasquez about the contingency plan that allowed your team to survive." Yara felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. The same feeling she had felt in that flooded valley. The same certainty. "What contingency plan would that be, sir?" Hessler smiled. "The one where I positioned you to continue the mission in case of primary assault failure. Your actions were exactly what I anticipated when I assigned you to Overwatch. The success of this operation is a testament to proper planning and you ordered mission abort." The words fell like stones into still water. Hessler's smile flickered. "I ordered a tactical repositioning, too. You called Dr. Kerensky acceptable collateral." Now the smile was gone entirely. "Sergeant, I understand you have been through a traumatic experience, but I will not tolerate insubordination. My orders were." "Your orders were transmitted on an open channel," Yara said. She turned to Colonel Vasquez. "Ma'am, Sergeant First Class Delgado's radio was active and transmitting throughout the assault. Every order Captain Hessler gave was recorded, including the order to abandon the hostage, including the extraction of command personnel while assault teams were still engaged." Vasquez's expression did not change. She looked at Hessler. "Captain, is this true?" "Colonel, the situation was fluid. Tactical decisions had to be made in real time. The dam failure created circumstances that—" "Is it true," Vasquez repeated, "that you ordered extraction while American soldiers were still trapped in the target building?" Hessler's jaw tightened. The tactical situation required. Yes or no, Captain? Silence stretched through the tent. Every radio operator had stopped talking. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation at the center of the room. Yes, Hessler finally said. But the decision was tactically sound given the... You left them to die. Yara's voice was quiet, but it carried through the tent like thunder. You flew away in a helicopter while Sergeant Delgado bled on the third floor. While Private Chun held a window against militia fighters. While Dr. Kerensky waited for the execution you told us was acceptable. Hessler's composure finally cracked. You disobeyed a direct order. You turned off your radio. You went rogue and endangered the entire operation with your... I saved them. 3 words. Simple. True. Undeniable. Yara stepped closer to Hessler, close enough to see the sweat forming on his brow. You gave an order that would have killed 7 people. I disobeyed it. And because I disobeyed it, 5 soldiers and 1 civilian are alive right now. That is not going rogue. That is being a soldier. Colonel Vasquez raised a hand before Hessler could respond. Enough. She turned to one of the MPs. Captain Hessler is relieved of command pending investigation. Escort him to quarters and ensure he remains there until further notice. Hessler's face went white. Colonel, you cannot be serious. My record. My career. This is... Your career, Vasquez said coldly, is no longer my concern. Get him out of here. The MPs stepped forward. Hessler looked at Yara one final time, his eyes burning with hatred and humiliation. This is not over, he said. Yara met his gaze without flinching. Yes, it is. They led him away. The medical tent was warm and quiet, and Yara finally allowed herself to collapse. They wrapped her in heated blankets and started in 4 of warm saline. A doctor examined her hands and feet for frostbite, declared her lucky, and ordered 12 hours of mandatory rest. A nurse brought her hot broth that tasted like heaven and salt. Yara drank it slowly, feeling the warmth spread through her body, feeling the ice that had settled in her bones finally begin to melt. She slept for 14 hours. When she woke, Delgado was sitting in a wheelchair beside her cot, his wounded leg propped up on a padded extension. He looked terrible, pale and drawn and held together by bandages and stubbornness. But he was smiling. You snore, he said. Yara blinked at him. I do not. You absolutely do. Ask anyone in this tent. They were placing bets on whether you would wake up before dinner. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. What time is it? 1800. You missed the whole day. He handed her a bottle of water. Drink this. Doctor's orders. She drank. The water was room temperature and perfect. What did I miss? She asked. Delgado's smile widened. Where do I start? Hessler is under formal investigation. Colonel Vasquez pulled every transmission from the operation and had them transcribed. His career is over. There's talk of a court-martial. Good. Dr. Kerensky has been on the phone with Washington all day. Apparently, he is some kind of big deal in nuclear engineering. The State Department is very happy he is alive. He keeps asking about you. Wants to thank you personally. He can buy me dinner when we get stateside. Delgado laughed. It turned into a cough, and he pressed a hand to his ribs. Do not make me laugh. Everything hurts. Yara set down the water bottle. How are the others? Chun took shrapnel to the shoulder, but she will recover. Kowalski is being medevaced to Germany for surgery on his abdomen. Prognosis is good. Rivera has a concussion and a broken wrist. Sauer made it through without a scratch. Kid is lucky. And you? Delgado looked down at his bandaged leg. The bullet nicked my femoral artery. They said another millimeter, and I would have bled out before you got there. He met her eyes. You saved my life, Yara. You saved all of us. Yara did not know what to say. The words felt too big for the moment. Delgado seemed to understand. He reached out and squeezed her hand once, then let go. There is something else, he said. Colonel Vasquez wants to see you when you are ready. She has news. Yara swung her legs over the side of the cot and stood. Her body protested violently, every muscle screaming at her to lie back down, but she ignored it. I am ready now. Delgado shook his head. Of course you are. She found Colonel Vasquez in a smaller tent that served as a private office. The colonel was seated behind a folding table covered in papers, a cup of coffee cooling beside her elbow. She looked up when Yara entered and gestured to an empty chair. "Sit down, Sergeant, before you fall down." Yara sat. Vasquez studied her for a long moment. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt like an assessment, one professional measuring another. "I have read your file," the colonel said finally. "3 combat deployments. Distinguished marksmanship. Incident in Kandahar that should have ended your career, but somehow did not." Yara kept her expression neutral. "I had a good NCO who went a bat for me. Delgado. Yes, I spoke with him. He told me about Corporal Myers. About what really happened." Yara felt her jaw tighten. "That report was sealed. I have the clearance." Vasquez leaned back in her chair. "A commanding officer gave an order that got a soldier killed. You tried to save him anyway. And when you failed, you made sure his body came home. Then you told that officer exactly what you thought of his leadership. Something like that. The official report says you were insubordinate and emotionally compromised." Vasquez paused. "My assessment is that you were right and he was wrong, and the Army did not want to admit it." Yara said nothing. There was nothing to say. "What you did yesterday," Vasquez continued, "swimming through a frozen flood, killing 8 enemy combatants alone, refusing to abandon your team when your commanding officer ordered you to. That is not insubordination. That is leadership." She slid a folder across the table. "I am recommending you for the Silver Star, the same medal they tried to give you after Kandahar. This time, I expect you will accept it." Yara looked at the folder, but did not touch it. "What happened to the officer from Kandahar?" she asked. Vasquez's expression hardened. "He made colonel. Last I heard, he was commanding a training brigade in Georgia. The Army protects its own, even when they do not deserve it. And Hessler will not be so lucky. There are too many witnesses, too much evidence. And Dr. Kerensky has powerful friends who want someone to blame for nearly getting him killed." Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. "Sometimes justice is slow. Sometimes it is fast. This time will be fast." Yara finally reached for the folder. She opened it and saw her name at the top of a recommendation form, the words Silver Star printed in official typeface. She thought about Teo, about the medal she had refused 3 years ago, about all the anger and guilt she had carried since that day. This would not bring him back. Nothing would bring him back. But maybe it was time to stop punishing herself for a death that was never her fault. "I will accept it," she said quietly. "For my team." Vasquez nodded. "For your team. Now get some rest, Sergeant. That is an order you will follow." Yara stood, tucked the folder under her arm, and walked out into the fading light of the Eastern European evening. For the first time in 3 years, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. 2 months later, the auditorium at Fort Benning was filled with dress uniforms and polished brass. Yara stood at attention on the stage, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere above the heads of the assembled soldiers and dignitaries. The Silver Star hung heavy on her chest, pinned there moments ago by a general whose name she had already forgotten. The citation had been read aloud, the words clinical and precise, reducing the chaos of that flooded valley to official language and approved terminology. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action, for extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy forces, for actions above and beyond the call of duty. The words meant nothing and everything at the same time. The ceremony ended with applause that echoed off the walls like distant thunder. Yara shook hands with officers she did not know, accepted congratulations from soldiers she would never see again, and smiled for photographs that would end up in folders and filing cabinets across the Army. When it was finally over, she stepped outside into the Georgia sunshine and took a breath of air that tasted like pine and freedom. Delgado was waiting for her by the parking lot, leaning on a cane that he swore he would throw away within the month. His leg had healed well, though the doctor said he would always walk with a slight limp. He wore his dress uniform with the easy confidence of a man who had earned every ribbon on his chest. "You clean up nice," he said. "You want to talk?" Yara gestured at his chest, where his own bronze star gleamed beside a purple heart. "They gave you enough hardware to set off a metal detector. What can I say? I'm a decorated hero now. He grinned. How does it feel? Yara considered the question. She looked down at the silver star, at the ribbon that represented everything she had done in that valley and everything she had failed to do in Kandahar. It feels like closing a door, she said, one that should have been closed a long time ago. Delgado nodded. He understood. He always understood. They walked together across the parking lot, moving slowly to accommodate his cane. The sun was warm on their faces, and somewhere in the distance a drill sergeant was shouting at recruits, the eternal soundtrack of military life. So Delgado said, Colonel Vasquez told me about the offer. Instructor position at sniper school. You gonna take it? Yara had been thinking about that offer for weeks. A chance to step back from combat. A chance to pass on everything she had learned. A chance to train the next generation of soldiers who would find themselves alone on ridge lines, watching through scopes, making decisions that no one else could make. I think so, she said. Someone has to teach them how to see what others miss. Delgado smiled. They could not ask for a better teacher. They reached her car and stopped. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, the kind that only existed between people who had bled together. What about you? Yara asked. What comes next? Medical retirement, Delgado said. He patted his wounded leg. The Army says, I am done with combat deployments. 22 years, and this is how it ends. With a handshake and a pension. You could teach too. You have more experience than anyone I know. Maybe. Delgado shrugged. Or maybe I will finally take that fishing trip I have been planning for 10 years. Buy a boat. Grow a beard. Become one of those old veterans who tells war stories to anyone who will listen. Yara laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm, and it surprised her. She had not laughed like that in years. You would be terrible at retirement, she said. Probably, but I'm going to try anyway. He reached out and gripped her shoulder. Take care of yourself, Okonkwo. And if you ever need anything, you know where to find me. Same to you, Tomas. She used his first name. She almost never used his first name. He noticed, and his eyes softened. Then he turned and walked away, his cane tapping against the asphalt, his silhouette shrinking until he disappeared around the corner of the building. Yara stood alone in the parking lot for a long moment. She thought about the valley, about the dam, about the water that had tried to swallow everything and everyone she cared about. She thought about Teo Myers, buried in a cemetery in Ohio, his grave marked by a stone that said nothing about how he really died. She thought about Captain Victor Hessler, whose court-martial had concluded 3 weeks ago with a dishonorable discharge and a prison sentence that would keep him locked away for years. She thought about Dr. Kerensky, who had sent her a letter last month with a photograph of his daughter. The girl was smiling, holding a sign that said thank you in bright crayon colors. And she thought about herself, about who she had been before Kandahar, about who she had become after, about who she might become now that the weight was finally lifting. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she did not recognize. Staff Sergeant Okonkwo. This is Private Sauer. I just got orders. Sniper school. They said you might be one of my instructors. Is that true? Yara smiled and typed a response. See you there, Private. Be ready to work. She put the phone away and climbed into her car. The engine started with a familiar rumble as she pulled out of the parking lot onto the road that led away from Fort Benning and toward whatever came next. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Drop a comment and let us know what part of the story moved you most, or if you know someone who has shown this kind of courage in their own life. We would love to hear from you. The road stretched ahead, empty and open. Yara drove toward the horizon, and for the first time in 3 years, she was not running from anything. She was running towards something, and that made all the difference.